Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David."
Welcome to Crossbridge. My name is Pastor Kevin, and I am the lead pastor here. And I want to welcome each one of you. I know I was actually able to be present at the Peru campus last week as their campus pastor. That was a great weekend, great things happening in Peru. I want to welcome those in Morris with Brian and with Jen and our whole gang over there. You're doing a tremendous job. And I want to welcome those who are tuning in online as well with Pastor Tricia. We're thankful that every week you choose to worship with us. So some of you may be wondering where I've been. I've not preached for the last 3 weeks, and I had 1 week where I was on vacation in Montana, which was a lot of fun. I did some kayaking, did some rafting, some horseback riding. You know, I'm just your regular cowboy. So, but it was fun, and then we came back, and I got to go with our teenagers to Nazarene Youth Congress in Phoenix. We took 22 of our students from United, and it was a tremendous week. I was reminded of what it felt like to be a youth pastor. It was fun for a week, but I don't think I want to do it forever. But I did have fun for a week, and so, and I just want to say this: I'm thankful for the last 3 weeks. When I think about Pastor Sherry and Pastor Kevin and Pastor John, they did a tremendous job of just sharing the story with you, and I am so blessed to have the team around me that I do. And but also say this: I'm excited to be able to share with you this week. And as I got together and sat down and wrote this sermon, man, it was fun to get back into it, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you. So we're going to pick up right where John left off with the story of Solomon. And toward the end of Solomon's reign, he got overly aggressive. He had building projects going on. He was building ships, and he began to overtax the people in a way which, in a sense, he had to force them into manual labor just to get it all done. And King Solomon passes on the throne to his son, Rehoboam. And so what you find is Solomon he passes on the throne to Rehoboam. Now, there's another individual we're going to talk about in this story today, too. And the individual is called Jeroboam. That may seem like, you know, they must have been brothers. I think Boam at the end of your last name was just something people did at this time. But there was an individual named Jeroboam. He was a young man, at one point officer in Solomon's cabinet, and a prophet. This was long before this. Tells Jeroboam he's going to be the king, but not now. And apparently, this is kind of how the story goes. Jeroboam gets impatient. He doesn't wait. He kind of rebels. He tries to take that on a little early. Solomon gets upset, attempts to kill him, and Jeroboam escapes to Egypt. So when Solomon finally dies, Jeroboam feels it might be a good time to come back home and to appeal to the new king, Rehoboam, for relief. And so that's kind of where we're starting the story. And it's chapter 14 in your book, the story, as you're reading it. But man, there is some really good things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you that we find in this story that I think are really going to connect with us and where we live today. So let me pray for us before we go any further. Father, thank you so much. I thank you for, I think about the faces of the people that even I know at these campuses. I thank you for the people at Morris, for the people at Peru. Even I'm reminded of some of our folks who live far from here but tune in every week online. And God, I'm just thankful for every one of them, and I'm thankful that Crossbridge continues to have the reach and the impact that it does. And I pray that you would connect this word to people's hearts. May we hear from you, and may your Spirit speak to us like we're the only one listening. Help me with my words today. I ask this in Jesus' name, amen. So here's what we have. As I said, Rehoboam comes back home, and he's appealing. Jeroboam, comes back home, and he's going to Rehoboam for relief. And here's what he says. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 4. Your father put a heavy yoke on us. He's referring to Solomon. But now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. Here's what it says. The king goes to consult the elders who worked with his father. I thought that was really an interesting line in the story. In fact, it was an interesting thought. You think about a king who has all power, can do whatever he wants, and yet he chooses to go consult the elders who worked with his father. I think this was a good move right here in the beginning of this story. In fact, here's what I would say, and I was reminded of as I read that, and I'm just going to pause right here in the story. As people who follow Jesus, maybe you're here today and you're still thinking about following Jesus. Maybe you're not quite there yet, but here's what I want to say. As people who decide to start a growing relationship with Jesus, it's so important that we have wise counsel in our life. In fact, I love the fact that a king goes to consult elders. Who do you go to? Here's what I want you to think about right now. You don't have to tell your neighbor or anything like that. But who do you go to for wise counsel? I think the other question might be, are you open to wise counsel? Some of us, that's a really hard thing. Some of us, we say, man, I don't want to talk to anybody because I don't want anybody to know what's going on in my life. And I would just say that is not wisdom, right? Wisdom would be that you'd be open to wise counsel. Another question maybe, do you have people in your life that you can talk to and that you can actually talk to and receive godly counsel? That's really important as well. You know, for some folks even, I would say this, I think a support system, you have to have it. For most of us, all of us, a support system. You may not think you need one, but you do. We all need support. Maybe you struggle with some issues in your life. I know some of our Crossbridgers who struggle with issues, and they need support systems. They need groups of people who will walk with them and help them. I believe there's probably people here at Crossbridge who would say, I know where I am, and I also know where I want to be, and I'm not there yet. I want to be more of a godly mom or a godly dad. I want to be more of a godly husband. And here's what I'd say. You need people who are speaking into your life, who are encouraging you, and are giving you wise counsel. I think about even people who are contemplating a relationship with God. I'm so thankful that Crossbridge is the kind of place that you can come to. And even if you don't necessarily, you're just not there yet with a relationship with God, you can come and you can just listen for week after week after week after week. And yet here's what I tell you. There comes a point, I think, where if you want to investigate further, allow wise counsel into your life. There's a point where I think every one of us, it's a hard place, but we get to the place where we can raise our hands and we can say, I need help. I don't have all the answers, and I'm open to some help. It was it's just a funny story I'm going to share with you. I was at NYC, and it was one of the last days, early in the week. The group that we were with, they brought in donuts from this place called Bosa Donuts. Now, I want to tell you, donuts are an extreme weakness for me. I love a great donut. And they brought these donuts in, and I went and I had a couple, and oh, they were so good. I was like, these are some of the best donuts I've had in a very long time. And so at the end of the week, I actually went to the leader who ordered those donuts, and I said, how far was that donut shop away from this hotel? And you can probably tell I have an issue with donuts. And he says, oh, Kevin, it's like a block and a half. And I was like, perfect. What was it called? And he told me Bosa Donuts. So I look it up. I see where it's at. It was maybe a little further than a block and a half. I'd say maybe 2.5, 3 blocks. But I saw right where it was. And so I thought, man, I'm going to get a donut. And I mentioned it to a couple of the kids. And I said, hey, if you guys get up early and you want to go with me, we'll go get a donut. And so in the morning, one of them, I sent a text to this group, and one of them said, man, I'm all in. Like, he was a boy after my own heart, right? And his name is Nolan, actually. And so Nolan and I, we head out of the hotel, and we start walking towards Bosa Donuts. And my app isn't working right on my phone, but I thought, hey, it's like 3 blocks away. Surely I can find Bosa Donuts in downtown Phoenix. And so we're walking. We get to the place where I think it should be, and I stop, and let me tell you something. Even in the morning, it's 100 degrees in Phoenix, and we are sweating. And I get to a crossroads, and I see the signs, and so I look on the map to see where that sign is, and I was like, oh, we walked like completely like the wrong direction. We were in a location here, and the donut place was over here. So we recalculated. Like I thought, okay, if we're here, and I don't know, maybe I was having like a low level of sugar, like I needed a donut, but I recalculated. And we started walking a different direction, and we started walking. And then we paused again, like 2 blocks down the road, and realized we were like not even close again. At this point, I'm getting a little frustrated, but I'm not showing it, right? And I think Nolan is probably frustrated with me, and he's not showing it. And then finally he looks at it, when in doubt, get wise counsel, even from a young person. Obviously, I'm lost. And so he looks, and he says, hey, I think we need to go this way. So we start walking. We get to this donut place. We're finally there. And we're like, this is where it's supposed to be. And we come around the corner, and there it is. Here's the problem. It's not there anymore. There's a poster. There is a poster on the window showing their donuts, but there is not a person in sight. And I don't know what happened to this donut place, but it's gone. Now, at this point, I'm going to tell you, like, I am frustrated. I've walked past 3 Dunkin' Donuts, but that just isn't going to do it. And so I said to Nolan, that's it. Like, I'm done. It's hot. Let's pull over in the shade. I pull up my phone, and I hit the Uber button. And sure enough, car comes in 2 minutes. We jump in it, and I said, take me to Bosa Donuts, right? And she drives to Bosa Donuts. I said, wait outside. We're just going to go in, grab a couple donuts. We come out. They drive us back. Let me tell you something. That was the most expensive donut I've had in a very long time. It ended up being about a $20 donut, but it was worth it. I tell you that story because I think there was a piece of me really, and Nolan, that probably could have walked around Phoenix for the next hour in the heat trying to find another Bosa Donuts. But see, I think for all of us, now listen to this. For all of us, there comes a point where we have to go outside. We have to go outside of our own point of reference to ask for help. We have to go outside of our point of reference to get direction, to get guidance, to get wisdom, for us to end up where we want to be. Many of us, I know this. In fact, as I look into this, and I'm talking to you today, and I know you're looking at me through a screen, but I can picture your faces, and I know for many of us, it is a struggle. It's a struggle to admit we need help. Now, let's dive back into the story. Listen to what happens next. Listen to the advice that comes back from this council of elders. It's really good advice. It says this. They replied, if today you'll be a servant to these people, and you will serve them, and you will give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. Okay, I mean, that is tremendous advice to the leader. He's basically saying to them, we know, King, you're the leader. We know you have the power. But if you will be a servant to these people, and you will relieve some of this pressure, they will always be your servants. In a sense, you will gain favor, right? Great advice. And here's what I'm going to tell you. He does not listen. He just plain and clear doesn't listen. And here's the lesson for us. If you want to be a leader, leaders, Leaders have influence, leaders have power, but true leaders don't abuse influence, don't abuse power. They use it to influence, to serve the people around them. You think about the Bible and you think about Jesus' example. I think in our world today, it's the greatest example of leadership. That we would serve those around us, that it wouldn't be about us gaining power, it would be about us giving that power away and empowering others that we have influence over. The way up in God's kingdom is not wielding the power we've been given, but finding ways to empower others. Real quick plug here. I just want to tell you this. We have something coming up at Crossbridge that I'm so thankful we do because I believe in it. It's called the Leadership Summit. I think you're going to see a link here. It's like crossbridge.church/summit. It's not too late. Get to that thing. I believe it's August 8th and 9th. Tremendous event. And you may say, I'm not a leader. And I'd say if you have influence, you are. And this would be an event for you to come to. As followers of Jesus, we're called to engage those around us from the bottom up, not the top down. That's a really big deal. In fact, I think it's such a big deal, even in the church, it's a big deal. So here's what I hope for Crossbridge, right? I hope Crossbridge is the kind of church that we're not on defense. We're not hiding in our churches, in our campuses, saying the rest of the world is in a terrible place, but we're hiding and we're gathered together. We're going to remain strong. And this is who we are. I just hope that's not us. And I'll tell you who I want us to be. I want us to be a group of people that we gather to be encouraged, challenged, and to hear from God. And then we go. And we go to love and to serve and to lead for Him in the way He's called us to lead. I was thinking about even some things like, I just think sometimes in the church, I'm not saying Crossbridge, in the church that we get so mixed up. And I'm just going to tell you, like, this is my heart. That when we sit and we just make ourselves judge over everyone else, we're not doing God any favors. When we try to convince others through arguing and telling them every way that they're wrong and every way that we're right, we're not doing God any favors. When we throw His word around like a club to knock people with, we're not doing God any favors. And here's what I would say. I mean, there's things we believe. There's things we stand for. There's things, go to our membership class. You will hear all about it. As a Church of the Nazarene, I think we have some places in which we really take strong stands. But I'll also say this. Here's what I hope. In the midst of taking a stand, it's not a defensive kind of posture, but it's the kind of posture that says we love everyone, that we may believe in these kinds of things, but we still love people on the other side of it. In fact, we lead with loving, we lead with listening, and ultimately we lead with serving. Now, what happens next in this story is what we do not do, okay? This is like the part of the story I want you to listen to and go, whew, don't do that, all right? Rehoboam rejects their advice. He just doesn't do it. And here's what he does. He decides to go to the young men he grew up with and that are now serving with him, and he says, I think I want to get their advice. This was a terrible idea. See, they were peers, and they were not positioned to tell him the truth. They were positioned to tell him what he wanted to hear. Here's what they say. They say, no. Don't be soft on them. Don't serve them. Don't offer them relief. In fact, make it harder on them. This is the time, Rehoboam. You got them right where you want them. Drop the hammer on them. That's my interpretation, right? And here's what I would say. This is the temptation for all of us. That when we surround ourselves with people and we're struggling with whatever it may be, we're in hard situations and we need godly counsel, we need wisdom, that oftentimes the people we choose to go to are the people that we've kind of handpicked that we think will say what we want them to say. That doesn't do any of us any favors. That doesn't lead you to wisdom. It leads you to friends who will tell you what you want to hear so you can do what you want to do. And oftentimes leads us exactly down the path that we're trying to avoid. One of the blessings I've had here at Crossbridge, I showed up about 7 years ago, and there was a group in place called the Mission Strategy Team. This mission strategy team, these guys, they have become some of my closest friends here at Crossbridge. But I remember when I first started going to that meeting, and it's at 6 o'clock in the morning, typically every other week, and we usually meet at a little bakery. Imagine that. Got a donut in there again. And one of the things I do is I talk to them about the issues of the church. I talk to them about what we're working on. I ask them questions. What are you noticing about the church? And how are we doing in accomplishing the mission? And when I first started, man, that group, it was the most honest group I've ever had in my life. Like, they didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. In fact, many times they told me exactly what I didn't want to hear. I would leave that meeting and think, oh, that was rough, right? Like, I mean, why do I do this meeting? Because when I go there, they just say things that are like, ugh, I don't want to hear it, right? They say, like, they don't just agree with me. And here's what I would say now, hindsight. I look back across the 7 years. I'm so thankful for that group of people in my life. Because here's what I know when I walk into a meeting at 6 a.m., that no matter what I say, I'm going to get honest feedback. I'm going to get the truth. Every one of us need people in our lives who will look us in the eye. And listen, I can tell you this. Every one of those people on the MST team, I believe they love me, and I love them. But we love each other enough that we want the best for God's kingdom and for each other, that we tell each other the truth. That's what every one of us needs. It's so much easier to put people around you that tell you what you want to hear. And that's a challenge to you, right? Surround yourself with the right people and give them permission to tell you the truth. So how is this conflict resolved? You got this mess happening in this story, right? You've got Rehoboam who he goes and he gets advice from the elders. They give him great advice. He ignores them. He goes to the younger folks who are his peers. They give him terrible advice, and he listens to them. And here's what you have. The fact that he listened to him and he did not ease up and he kept powering down, there was an issue. In fact, here's what happened. It resolved in the kingdom being divided. This series is called Crash and Burn because this is not it's taken us to a bad place. In fact, Jeroboam takes the 10 tribes of Israel to the north and he forms a new nation. And he becomes the king. And Rehoboam stays on as the king in the south with 2 remaining tribes, Judah and Benjamin, and it's called Judah. So what's the theme of this story? What do I want you to hear? Here's what I want you to hear. In the words of Jesus himself, Mark chapter 3, verse 25, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Think about this. A once mighty nation of Israel that God built from scratch, that was a force to be reckoned with, has been weakened. This is the place in the story where the kingdom, which was, this strong group of people that God has done incredible things through, right, is divided. And here's what I want you to catch. This is really, really important. They're not divided from the outside. The division happened from the inside. When we are divided from within, we eventually crumble. In fact, this almost turned into a civil war. Rehoboam, Jeroboam, they're getting ready to go at it with their armies. And here's what it says in 1 Kings chapter 12. This is what the Lord says. Do not go up and fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing. So they obeyed the word of the Lord, and they went home again as the Lord had ordered. Now here's also what I want you to hear. You may say, well, man, this Rehoboam and Jeroboam, they got it all mixed up, and this was bad. And here's what I would say. This started way before Rehoboam. This started in the story of Solomon. We heard it last week that Solomon started off on this great path, but towards the end of his life, he went rogue. And he began to build temples for all kinds of other gods, and he began to worship other gods. And in fact, listen to 1 Kings chapter 11, and you're going to hear how we got to this place in the story. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, listen, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude and you've not kept my covenant, my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son, Rehoboam. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David, my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. You think about this. What we're seeing in this story in chapter 14 is exactly what God said to Solomon. It's exactly what he said was going to take place, and it is. Here's what I took from that. I think about Solomon, and I think about this man who was the wisest man ever to live, right? And yet still really messed things up towards the end of his life for those who came after him. It was a reminder to me as I was writing this sermon. I thought to myself, the decisions that I make, the decisions that you make, they don't just affect you. There are times where we make decisions that affect many people who will come after us. There's times when we take a left turn off God's path, we take a right turn away from his plan for our life, and we think, this made a mess for me. The truth is, even in this story, when Solomon took a bad turn, it affected all these people who were to come after him. What a great reminder. There is a lot at stake. John talked about last week leaving a legacy, walking with God hand in hand. And our greatest legacy is not in our talents, and it's not what we accomplish. It's in our walk with God, and I would so agree with that. In fact, one of the things that, as I think about this, God had done this great work through Solomon, but here's what had happened, right? Solomon had distorted and confused this great plan of God when he began to worship other gods. And here's what happened. You had this great group of people doing great things that everyone should have looked at and said, man, this points to the one true God. But when Solomon began to bring all these other gods into play, all of a sudden God wasn't getting the credit anymore. And people weren't looking to the one true God anymore. And it truly watered down and made a mess of all of this. The big picture was this. Whenever Israel was fully devoted to God, they prospered. But when they divided their loyalties with other gods and interest, they were weakened. Big thought I want you to take, and this is what it is. John talked about it last week, this idea, are we preoccupied with our relationship with the one true God, or are we preoccupied with all these other kinds of things? In fact, here's how I want you to think about it. There's often times where even I think in our own hearts and minds, we take our spiritual life and we separate it. We separate it from everything else. We separate it from our work life. We separate it from our home life. We separate it from our life with our friends. And it's never meant to be. Our spiritual life was meant to engulf all those other things. It was meant to engulf that our relationship with God would affect how we live at home, and our relationship with God would affect how we live with our friends, and our relationship with God would affect how we do our work. In fact, I believe that when we are preoccupied with our relationship with God and we're focused single-mindedly on Him, it brings everything else into congruency. The greatest threat to you is probably not going to come from the outside. The greatest threat to you is that you would get distracted in your heart on the inside. We need to make sure that we're doing our part to stay fully focused. It reminded me of James chapter 4. As I wrap this up today, there's a passage that as I was writing the sermon, I thought this passage, it's very blunt, but it makes sense as we talk about this. And this is what it says in verses 7 and 8. Submit yourselves then to God. Submit. There's something about that, right? It just sounds like I'm all in. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. Come near to God, and he'll come near to you. Wash your hands, right, you sinners. Purify your hearts. And it goes on to say, you double-minded. You'll see the fact that there's many times in the New Testament where you hear this idea of being double-minded, and you hear a warning against it. I think that is a great, great warning. And I think that the call is this, that God would get our single-minded attention, that we not become so preoccupied with everything else that we lose sight of where He's calling us and what He has in store for us and the plan before us. I want to encourage you, single-minded focus on your relationship with God, and then everything else. And, allow the truth, support, let people come alongside. Let people speak the truth in your life. Listen, that we may keep a single-minded focus and that you may become all that God has in store for you. Hey, at this time, our campus pastors are going to come and they're going to lead you in the response today.